Okay, so here we go, 9.4, which is solving quadratics using the square root. So square roots, just to remind you, look like that. And so we're going to go ahead and do the top part right here as if it was your warm-up. So go ahead and pause the video and try it as a warm-up. Okay, so we have this little triangle area here, and then we have 3 squares around it, and it wants to know how you can determine the side lengths of the enclosed triangle. Well, I can get this side length right here by finding this length, but the area of a square is all sides of the square are the same, so it's going to be x times x to get that 625. X times x is x squared. And then to find what x is, we have to take the square root of both sides, which gives us x equals 25. So this side length right here is 25. And then you would repeat the process for each one. So if I wanted this side length right here, I would do x squared equals 576. Take the square root of both sides, and then get that answer. And then you would do the same thing right here. X squared equals 49. Square root both sides, so here x equals 7. Part B, whatever you found is fine. Maybe you found a pattern of something that we'll talk about later. Maybe you just talked about like this being the biggest side and these were smaller than that side. Whatever you found is perfect. So we're going to jump into some examples now. And so the first thing we're going to do is solve equations that are just like the ones up here, where you have x squared equals a number. So we have that x squared equals 49. And so we want to know what times itself equals 49. So up here we said 7. 7 times 7 is 49. However, there's another option. We can do negative 7 times negative 7 and still get a positive 49. So whenever you take the square root of both sides, you have a plus or minus the answer. So this little symbol right here is saying that this is x equals 7 and x equals negative 7. It's a plus or minus. Okay. So then the next one, if we go ahead and look there, we want to know what times itself equals negative 121. So then you take the square root, and if you put this in your calculator, it says error, but let's think about why. So what times itself would get 121? Let's focus on that first. Well, that would be 11 times 11, but that would equal a positive 121. Well, what if I do negative 11 times negative 11? That would still give me a positive 121. The only way to get negative 121 with this would be 11 times negative 11, and that's not the same. This would be x and this would be negative x. So that's not going to work. So this is actually a no solution. Okay. So using this information, pause the video and try these 4 here. Okay, so taking the square root of both sides is 13, and then we have that plus or minus. This has a negative and this has a negative, so they're no solution. And then the square root of 625 is 25. But the main thing is, do not forget that plus or minus. Okay. If you have any questions, please email Ms. Holstad or I, and we will be happy to help you. So now we're going to jump up to one more step on what we were doing. So now we're going to have a number in front of x squared and solve for that. So the first thing you're going to do is get x squared by itself. So this is step 1. So we have 7 times x squared equals 112. So the first step is going to be getting rid of this 7. Right now it's multiplying to x squared, so we're going to divide. And so then those go because they equal 1 now. And 112 divided by 7 is 16. And then now we're back to what we were doing up above and square root both sides. So we're going to square root that side, square root that side. Square root of 16 is 4. So we have x equals plus or minus 4. And that one's done. Okay, so now going back to this next one. Excuse me. What are the solutions of the equation negative 3x squared equals negative 24? So up here we said, oh, there's a negative, there's no solution. Well, you have to first get x squared by itself before you determine that. So we need to take this right here and get x squared by itself. So we need to divide by negative 3 on both sides. And we get x squared equals a positive 8. So it's now going to have a solution because we had to divide by a negative on both sides, and that made this side positive. So now we can go ahead and square root both sides. And it's not a perfect square, meaning that it's a decimal. So in some of your questions, it'll ask you what 2 integers the solution is between, and some of it might ask rounding. So if you wanted to do rounding, you would put this in your calculator, and you get that it's plus or minus 2.83. Okay, if you wanted to round, if you wanted to find the 2 integers, we would look at, well, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, so it's in between 2 and 3. Okay, so you can take the square root and be like, well, it's 2.83, so it's between 2 and 3. Or you can think about 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, so that's too low. 3 squared is 9, that's too high, so it has to be in between 2 and 3. Go ahead and pause the video and try these 2. Okay, so this first one here, we divide by 5 on both sides, and we're left with x squared equals 25. Square root both sides, and we get x equals plus or minus 5. On this one, there's two ways you can, actually three. You can change this 1/2 into a decimal, deal with it like a decimal. So you could change this to a decimal and do negative. Ooh, that pen is not going to work. So you could do negative 0.5 x squared equals negative 36, and then deal with it that way. Another way you could do it is when you have a fraction, to get rid of a fraction, you multiply by what's called the reciprocal. And that's just the flip of this. So the reciprocal of 1/2 would be 2/1, or just 2. So you could multiply by -2 on both sides. Or you could just divide by -1/2 or 0.5, and you still get the same thing. So now this one is not a perfect square, because if we think about it, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared, 9, 4 squared, 16, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's somewhere in between here. So it's x is between 8 and 9. Okay, so let's go on farther now. Now we're going to have a number in front of the x squared, but we're also going to have a plus or minus number on the same side. So we're still going to get x squared by itself, but you're going to do PEMDAS backwards. So you're going to start with the subtraction or addition first. So we're going to deal with addition or subtraction. So we have a -5, so we're going to add 5 to both sides. So now we're left with 3x squared equals 27. Then we're going to divide by 3. So now we have x squared equals 9. And then we go ahead and square root both sides, and we get x equals plus or minus 3. Okay, pause and try the next two. Okay, so this one you add 19 first, then divide by -5. We end up with a negative, so this one is no solution. This one we subtract 17, divide by 3, square root both sides, x equals plus or minus 8. If you have any questions, please email Ms. Holstad and I. We can make additional videos, we can give you more examples, just you have to let us know that if you need any help. Last one. So we have a cell phone tower, and we have the guy wire, which is 200 feet, and it says the same distance from the tower and the height of the tower. And it wants us to know what is the height, so we're looking for this side length right here. So we have x squared, or excuse me, x and the top of the triangle. So you first need to recall the Pythagorean theorem that you've briefly learned about, but it's just saying that this side squared plus this side squared would equal this long side. So the two sides touching this 90-degree angle squared plus that. So we have x squared plus x squared equals 200. So this is 1 and 1, so now we have 2 of them. And then we divide by 200, and we get x squared equals, oops, this should have been 400, because we do the 200 squared